recording
Worry
yet?
about when you're not here.
Rebecca? Yeah, she just started recording. So we'll call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. Thank you, Rebecca. Really appreciate it.
Kurt can't hear you.
Can't hear you, Kurt.
We heard you at the beginning, but then you cut out. Try again.
Try
I think when Rebecca made me the host, it muted everybody. So
You're good now.
okay, terrific. So I guess probably the takeoff point is everybody got the revised slides, right?
Yeah.
We're able to take a look at those. I might as well go ahead and I'll just share a significant amount of work kind of looking at how to come up with warrant articles around both the capital and O&M expenses. And it's kind of interesting when we put it all together. Gary Sorkin at the last meeting had suggested, kind of going big. Can you see the screen?
Yep.
Yeah.
See it, okay. He had suggested going big. We kind of kicked around, Scott and I, a couple of ideas. What we were thinking might make sense is since the wastewater plan is set and since the EP is expecting to see sort of 5-year increments for your plan, so it's 5 years, then you a real brush down what's working, what's not, do the adaptive management basically after a 5-year interval. So if we took your interval, the other nice thing about that is that we probably will be able to get a number of these IA systems, and within the 5-year period, we'd probably be able to get general use approval, which would take away the risk to a homeowner, in terms of putting one of these things in. And, and in response, Richard and Fred, to your comments at the last meeting as well, or how long should we keep a subsidy, or when does that make sense to curtail? And, Fred, you had after 5 years, these systems are, why don't we just mandate? We did was then figure out.
You're breaking up, Kurt, just so you know, you're breaking up a little bit. At least you're breaking in.
We're getting most of it, but you're breaking up a little bit.
Okay, I may have a bad internet connection. So, and there may not be anything I can do about it. So I will
Kurt,
try to speak slowly.
Kurt, I was just going to suggest when we look at the 25-year plan, remember that I've included 2 costs, one with the subsidy continuing and one not. So we'll be able to look at that issue you're talking about.
Right. So if we look at a 5-year plan and take all the numbers from Scott's analysis, that would amount to a $6.4 million borrowing authorization, which would give the wastewater plan some stability in terms of funding. It would also allow us to, begin the process of looking for grant funding for this, and also it would allow us to go to DEP and say, okay, the town is committed to a financing of its wastewater plan. And then for town meeting purposes, this would just be an authorization. It would be an option to borrow, necessarily a commitment, but at least we would have a level of funding that we would expect, under probably a Prop 2.5, bonding authorization article. So I'll kind of stop there. We can, yes.
So since these are a 5-year plan, I mean, like, you're going to have to educate me on warrant articles. So when we put in a warrant article and we said, we're going to want basically $750,000 a year for 5 years. And that comes up to $3,750,000, right? Shouldn't we say that that's $750,000 for 5 years, and so that they understand what it is on a yearly budget base?
No, because we have that as another yearly operating budget that's separate from this.
Ah, okay, so we're just
Yeah.
basically saying
This is just, we want to be able to borrow this amount of money for capital expenditures over the next 5 years.
okay,
And then we have a separate line item that we're going to say we want to fund for operating expenses, operating maintenance expenses, whatever it is per year over 5 years. But we're only going to ask for a single year. We're going to tell them this is going to be a constant, a relatively constant thing for the next 30 years or some
Got it.
period.
all right, cool. And we can't get grant, can we get, we may be able to get grants for the O&M too, at least at first, is that correct?
It's probably going to be a lot harder to get grants for the O&M portion, Fred.
Coming from someone who gives out grants all the freaking time, or did give out grants for all the freaking time, I just wanted to know how much it was cost, what would the capital and what the operation and maintenance was going to be to get the thing launched,
Right. So these two slides are a response to your comments earlier, Fred, to kind of break that out.
Yeah.
And it would require two different warrant articles. One is a borrowing authorization for this portion, and then the other would be with creation for the ongoing annual expenses.
So should we ask the selectmen and the finance board to basically say, should we make this one warrant article, or should we make it, or two warrant articles, or should we make it, I guess it would be 8, so that like you can kind of like it's a menu item. I want the innovative alternative, but I don't want to pay for the 95 Lawrence Road thing. And the shelf propagation, I'm good, but the other stuff I'm not so good. You see my point?
I think we're better off putting it to the town as being a package.
I
We
think
spent
you're
a lot
probably
of time working on
it's
this.
sort of a no-brainer there that it has to be a package. But I know this town, and they're gonna, they're gonna want a menu. But they can always amend the articles at the meeting too.
Yeah, I mean, our first job is recommendation.
Yeah.
And we've had a number of discussions about the complexity of this. This is the plan that Scott put together that meets DEP's objectives. I don't think there's really a Chinese menu here, except for a set of alternatives that meets the objective, or some level of sewering that meets the objective. And that's kind of, that should be a pretty clear choice for the town.
Well, I think it is a clear choice for the town. I understand the clear choice. It's basically pay me now or pay me in a couple of years, but the price tag in a couple of years is going to be 5, 6, 7 times what it's going to be if we go this route over the 30 years. And the other part about it is there's going to be ongoing maintenance, and it ain't going to be cheap maintenance. And I guess it really comes down to is how do we make this argument so people understand that you're going to do one or the other. You don't have a choice. And we're trying to give you the cheapest, most encompassing choice that we can come up with that is, taking advantage of everything we have, and that's going to cost us 5 times less. Or whatever. I can't remember what the exact numbers is. It's like 190,000 for full soaring, 190 million for full soaring, and then it was like for not the hybrid plan, but this plan. I'm just
Maybe 50 million.
all the stuff I
Yeah,
was looking at.
27 to 50 million.
Yeah,
I think the thing
27.
is that if you put it as a menu thing, if we don't get all of this approved, we don't have a DEP plan.
Okay, I get it. All right.
Then we're saying to DEP, hey, we got a great plan. You'll
We
do
don't have a
some of
compliant
what you
plan.
want us to do.
Guys, it was just a question. I mean, all I wanted to know was, I'm just thinking town, I'm thinking about the audience. I'm thinking about town hall and saying, guys, we want $6.4 million over 3 years for capital improvements and $431,000 a year for operating and maintenance. They're going to be like, okay,
Right.
I mean, like, think about it. It took almost, what was it? It was something ridiculous, like 30 or 40 years
For the water.
to figure out the town water was a good idea. It was 30 or 40 years. Am I incorrect with that?
So, yeah. So Fred, what we were thinking about doing, what Scott and I discussed doing, was Scott's going to do exactly the same presentation that he's done for our labs.
Yeah.
So it's going to be, a presentation that meet DEP requirements, what a full sewering option would be to meet DEP's requirements. And then lastly, we have, if the town at some point in, years 5 through 10 or 10 through 15 wanted to do, for example, central district sewering, there's an alternative that we've already outlined that would, provide some additional nitrogen benefits for particular costs. So all options are on the table for the town. And the first thing that Scott's going to do is go through, as I said, exactly what we had discussed at our last two meetings, which I think makes it really clear. Option A is a set of alternatives that meet DEP's requirements, or option B, we can sewer. That certainly meets the requirements. The difference being that sewering is about $100,000 per household to hook up, and significantly higher O&M. The alternative plan is more like 12.5 per household to achieve the same level of reduction and almost no O&M. And in the bigger picture, doing the enhanced IAs lets us expand the footprint, or reduce the footprint rather, of a leach field. It allows for an extra bedroom. It also doesn't put us in a position where we're overbuilding a sewer system for potential new hookups down the road, and that number not being right. So in this case, when money is being expended, it's specifically for achieving nitrogen reduction to that household, and not for additional households.
But
So,
we've got three great alternatives here. There's also the fourth alternative, which is do nothing. All right. And we have to kind of explain that the do nothing alternative will result in us having to do something, and probably, the most expensive. Is that correct?
Fred,
Well,
the do nothing alternative would probably require hiring lawyers to defend against probably a continued lawsuit by CLF, right? So that's another option.
Yeah, and the other thing that appears likely to happen now is that with Wellfleet Harbor being nitrogen sensitive, we could very easily be in a position in a year or two where DEP says, you guys don't have a plan, any construction of any kind in the town of Wellfleet, period. So that's the do nothing alternative.
I think that's what we have to, kind of run home is that, if we do nothing, because the thing is that, I know what happens in town meetings. They see the $6 million, over 5 years, and the more money to come. They're basically, people in the audience are going to basically say, well, what if we do nothing? That's not going to raise any taxes, and we don't have to go down this road. We don't have to get grants and all that stuff. We can just do nothing. And it's got to be made crystal clear. If we do nothing, we will end up with a $190 million bill that we will not be able to get around. Right? We're trying this right now. We're in a place where we can actually be part of the solution we may still be able to be part of the solution in the future, but in the future, there's going to be a gun to our head.
We're also
Am I
gonna have
missing anything here?
we're also gonna have a recommendation from the selectmen and the finance committee, I assume. And I assume that
Yes.
they're gonna recommend what we're recommending.
I
The
hope
other thought
so.
of putting one of Scott's presentations up on the committee's website and encouraging people to see it. I mean, it's a lot to digest at a town meeting. You know, to see if people aren't familiar with the topic, to say, okay, we've got half an hour to present to you something that you don't know anything about. And in half an hour, we're going to ask you to vote to commit to borrowing $6.5 million and spending $400,000 or $500,000 a year for operating expenses.
Yeah, that's what we're asking them to do. And I want them to understand that, like, this is just,
Well, and we only have,
that, you know, it's not like, well, you know, town water where we could kind of avoid it for 30 or 40 years. We can't avoid it for 30, 40 years. We've got to do it now.
so, you know, that's what this why now thing, Fred, was, to try to capture some of those things. Because we do have to make the case. We're only going to have 5, maybe 10 minutes if the moderator, you know, allows us. There's only 5 to 10 minutes to present the whole thing.
I'm hearing you.
So we don't have a lot of time.
Is there any, how much information can we get out prior to?
Well, Fred, I was actually talking about that today, or thinking about that, and I think we need to do that. I was looking at the town website. We need to put some stuff on there, update it. A lot of the information on there is a little dated, and I think we can add a lot to that. But there may be some other, I know Maria was very supportive of doing a lot more outreach and public participation. So we can certainly start with the website. We could maybe conduct some public meetings, open, advertise them more. I could go through the slideshow coupled with the budgets, the 3 alternatives. We probably should do a few of those before town meeting.
Oh, I mean, as much as we can. I mean, like this is the whole messaging part of this thing.
Yeah.
That I think, and the thing is that, you know, Kurt, you've been invested in this longer than I have, right? Or Richard has, right? We've been invested in, I don't know, 3 years. Scott, you've been studying this forever. Emily, you're looking at this because it's like, I may have to do the same thing in Churro, you know? And, you know, so it's basically kind of going, guys, you've gotten lots of free support on this for, you know, years. Now we're telling you you know, we're telling you, town of Wellfleet, this is what's going to happen. You know, we're going to do one of these 3 things now, or we're going to have to turn around, and if we do nothing, and we're going to be told what to do, you know, and we don't want to be told what to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think the default solution is a sewer. That's what DEP is going to push anybody towards to resolve the Clean Water Act issues, because that's a known fix. What we're proposing is something a little different. There's a little more risk involved with some of these things, but the costs look very favorable. So.
Oh, I think it looks, I mean, like,
Emily,
it looks
Emily,
great.
you were trying to say something?
I did want to just remind everybody that the town water situation resulted in numerous administrative consent orders from the state. So, you know, you're totally on the right track. And you know, I don't think that you bring it to them as if it's a question, because it's not really a question, you know. And I also just wanted to suggest that you can use something like this on your website and just draw attention to it from your main page, so that folks can always get this information anytime they want. They don't have to tune into a meeting live. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, this is kind of like, I know how small towns work. I know how, I mean, like I've worked with thousands of them, literally, you know, and I know, like, they're like going, well, you know, that's a lot of money, or this or that, or, you know, we sure we could do this. And I'm like, guys, you got to do something, or A, the funding will go away, and B, that someone's going to come along and say, you must, you know. And, we don't want to be in the situation where we get to you must. And like you said, Emily, I didn't realize there were consent orders that went on with Wellfleet Town Water, but I don't doubt it, I mean,
Well, another thought I'm having, Kurt, is we're planning a meeting with DEP in the next week or two to talk with them where we're at and update. Perhaps it's worth asking them if they can help us convince the town that there is no action option. Let them be the bad guys, maybe. Maybe there's a way to do that. We can ask them, because that's where the regs are going to come from. That's where the legal requirements are going to come from, is the state.
you made a really good point. We can pay for infrastructure in the ground, or we can pay for lawyers.
Yep.
And
Right.
and that's even more riskier. No offense, Richard.
None taken.
I think that's kind of what DEP has been trying to do with this, with this nitrogen sensitive declaration, is really put the screws in the town, because you're exempt from that, moratorium on construction if you have a watershed permit. So if we have a watershed permit, if we have a plan, which is made up of all these elements that we're talking about, we will be able to escape the moratorium. And that's I think what DEP's strategy was, because I think there's a lot of towns that are dragging their feet to comply, and this is DEP's strategy.
Well, I mean, I think
But at town meeting,
DEP know it works. I mean, like, eventually they just keep turning the screws, and it's just like, okay, now we're going to go to a consent order. Now will you do something? It just keep turning the screws. They know it works.
I think the town gets that, and I think the bigger driver for most people in town is they want a clean watershed. A lot of people have said consistently over the last 10 years, we really care. It's our most valuable asset is our harbor. That water quality, is supportive of our shellfish industry, supportive of all of the activity. So I'm not so sure that. I think it's easier. I think most people in town have more fondness for doing something about wastewater than they did about water. I think water was a little bit, less clear in terms of why it was so important.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but anyway, the point of these slides is to try to, figure out. Well, first of all, we have to make a recommendation, and we're kind of really up against it, at least to today's meeting. And the second thing then is to develop that communication strategy, as you said, Fred, and as Scott has been, trying to work on. So.
Yeah, Emily's pointing out that the cost of capital projects don't get any cheaper, which is my point. Was with the town water when, I think it was in the 60s or something. We had the option of like we were digging up the roads, and they were like, well, let's put in town water at the time, and we didn't do it.
So let me kind of take a step back, since we have Harry, Elaine, Jim, and Gary also on in the meeting today. Scott, why don't you do a quick overview of the three plans?
Right, do you want
keeping
to
in mind?
Sorry.
Stop and give you the screen. Keeping in mind that this will be the lead off to present this, and then we're going to try to break it down into the specific with these slides, which would be, related to why now, what are the alternatives, benefits. So these are the articular strategy. And with that, Scott, why don't you go ahead and do the first part first.
Okay, you want me to go through this first, the spreadsheets?
Yeah, just
Generally,
quickly
yeah.
run through. Yeah,
Sure.
generally, and how it comports with what we're talking about in the later slides.
Yeah. Okay, so I won't hit any of the details here unless we want to come back, but I've got 3 plans here highlighted in yellow. Option A at the top here is non-traditional, which really has minimal or no sewering. Then option B, which is solving the problem with using sewers, central sewers and wastewater treatment. And then option C is a hybrid plan that includes some of both. And I guess a couple of keys, these are across the top here. These are the various strategies or technologies, if you will, for each of the plans. So for example, in the non-traditional plan, we have the 95 Lawrence project. We have a lot of so-called enhanced INA septic systems, stormwater and fertilizer management, which DEP will give a credit to the town up front. So I put it in here. A permeable reactive barrier project that hopefully we'd expand over time. And I should mention there's 5 phases here. Each one is a 5-year period. So you're looking at a 25-year plan. What I've tried to do is break down the steps of each one of these technologies over that 25-year period. Over here to the right, we've got a few more. We've got shellfish program, and I've just put in a 5% increase placeholder. Some ecological restoration projects, and I need to finish this, but right now we just got the Mayo project in here now, et cetera, et cetera. So our totals for each of the 5-year periods, these are in kilograms per year of nitrogen reduction. And our goal is this number here, 20,250. If you can just remember that number, you'll see that that is the number that we get to in each plan. And then down below are the costs in millions of dollars. So you can see this has a range of 27 to 53. And as I mentioned earlier, that's dependent on how far this 12,500 subsidy goes. In the first option, A1, I'm calling it, we'd subsidize only certain upgrades, whereas the A2 would be for all of the EIAs, enhanced INAs that get put into town. So we get this range of 27 to 53 million. If I can go to the central sewer plan, again, we achieved 20,250 kilograms per year reduction. The estimated cost is around 197 million. That, as my footnote says here, that's based upon an assumption of about $100,000 per home. And by the way, I recently confirmed the cost numbers for the Orleans sewer system, and that it came in at 97,000 per home, plus anywhere between 5 and 20,000 for the lateral hookup. So probably a little more than $100,000 per home, but I'm using 100 as a round number here. I've also got some cost information from the Cape Cod Commission that I'll add in here, which is going to come out pretty similar. But in any case, 197 million for that option. And then the third option here is the hybrid plan. And this one does include, as you'll see under the centralized sewer, it does include some downtown phases. I refer to the Woodard and Curran report, and they identified a central district of 175 parcels and then an eastern district of 216 parcels. Now that project was designed before we had the MEP report. So they didn't know how much nitrogen reduction was required. And you can see that these two numbers here add up to 3,000, which is far short of the 20,000 we need to solve the MEP issue. So this plan really limits the sewering to the downtown most dense area in accordance with the Woodard and Curran plan. It would obviously service some of the more constrained properties in the downtown district. But again, that limited sewering doesn't get you all the way there. So we still need all of these other technologies, but really less of them. You'll notice if you look at the plan in detail, the number of enhanced INA septics goes down from, you can see this was 620 per 5-year period. We're back here, we're 800 per 5-year period. So the numbers get adjusted to end up, reducing the same amount, the 20,500, or excuse me, 20,250 kilograms per year. So quick summary is the non-traditional plan, 27 to 53 million, central sewering, 197 million, and then the hybrid between 60 and 90 million dollars over that 25-year period. And I'm happy to go in more detail, but that's a quick overview.
So in that first plan, there was another option we were talking about last week, which was basically basically say, okay, you get 12.5 the first year, the first 5 years, then we
Right.
the subsidy in half, and we say, okay, after the you only get 6,200 for the next 5 years, and after that, all you get is the extra bedroom. And that's another way
Right.
at it, kind of like a shrinking.
Yeah, and that would probably, I didn't run that, but I certainly can as a third option here. But my guess is, just from what you just described, is you're probably going to be a little less than the 27 million. It might come in around, let's say, 15 or 20 million if you did that.
Yeah, it's an option just because
Sure.
it's a lot of money, guys. Let's just face it. I mean, I don't think people fully recognize, that for a small time, that's a lot of money. But if you come up with other ways to reduce it and say, hey, guys, in the end, even if you don't upgrade your septic in the first 10 years, you're still going to get an extra bedroom.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not sure how much an extra bedroom helps people. I mean, for some people, I think an extra bedroom is a big concession, but for a lot of people, I don't think it is.
Yeah.
The bigger thing I think actually is the potential of reducing the leach field by maybe 50%. There's a lot of places where, there's either lot line constraints, foundation constraints, or other constraints that really make upgrading a system really difficult. So that's probably a big plus. Thing is, again, we're talking about 12.5 per household as opposed to about 100,000 or more per household. So that's the big driver. I think that should be a pretty clear choice. I would think that's a pretty clear choice for most people in town of Wellfleet.
Yeah, and the other option is the town, through the health regulation, could simply require an enhanced INA period at the homeowner's expense. I think the reason we started talking about the subsidy was because right now we're dealing with a provisionally approved system to get these kind of reductions. And we thought that we needed some kind of incentive, but I think, your point about maybe phasing that out over time, that is a possibility if the Board of Health wants to go that direction. So that I will create a third option here that will reflect that. And again, my guess is that'll bring the cost down, maybe even to half of that, which frankly, to solve this nitrogen problem for less than $20 million over 25 years would be, I think we should get some awards for that if that actually happens. I don't know if that's ever been done before. So that certainly would be an option to discuss with the Board of Health.
So is our basic, what we're basically saying is option one is our preferred option, and we have A, B, and C underneath that. Option two, we have to have our fail-safe option, but we have to have it.
Well, Fred, the other thing that
And option three is kind of our, okay, here's an option that may fare better for the businesses of the downtown district. It may be something that, in order to ensure that Wellfleet is viable in the next 50 years, we have a way of saying we're going to take care of our businesses by storing the downtown district.
Fred, I think that's right, and thanks for asking the question. Let me be clear about one other important part of this. We're discussing this really just within the town, making a choice. But remember, the important partner we have is Mass DEP. And as we've talked many times, I don't believe Mass DEP is going to sign off on a watershed permit with this option A, unless we link it. Unless we link it with some backup plans in option B and C, because of the provisional status of the INA system. In my opinion, I could be wrong, but in my opinion, that they'll probably only approve a watershed plan if this has some asterisks and footnotes in it that says at the end of each 5-year period, we have a sit down between the town and DEP and see how we're doing relative to this number right here. So if let's say we only get halfway there, certain things aren't working, then that might trigger something down here like designing maybe designing the first phase of the downtown sewer. That's something we're going to have to craft in the watershed permit, and that's not here. Here, we're just looking at 3 seemingly independent plans, but in reality, for the watershed permit, there's going to have to be some linkages. Kurt mentioned the term adaptive management, which we've talked about, and that's really in my opinion, our only hope of getting this first plan approved is with some sort of adaptive management agreement as part of the permit, that we may have to go to parts of option B or C if in fact we don't get the performance that we think we're going to get here.
So basically trigger points.
Correct.
Got it.
Correct.
Right. And
Got it.
earlier point, Fred, and sort of what I think Emily was saying as well, we don't really have a choice. We've got to come up with a plan that meets that 256 kilograms of reduction. And whether we can do it inexpensively or whether we're going to be forced to very we really,
My whole thing is just,
don't
I
have
just want to have
options.
I just wanted to have something that, that we're selling something that we're all agreeing on. We've lived and breathed it for, I don't know how many years. I mean, to be perfectly frank, I understand everything on these spreadsheets and on your plan, which kind of says I must have learned something in 3 years. But how do you explain that to a group of a town meeting full of voters? And I think the main thing is
It's your job as a member of this committee to come up with some arguments.
thank you so much for that, Hubert, and I really appreciate that.
Well, one thing I think we should try to avoid is putting too many different wrinkles into these plans. Scott starts saying, well, you could do this, or you could do this, you could do this, you could do this. It makes it a lot harder to try to sell to a large audience. I think what we need to do is say, look, there are 3 plans and these are what they are. And not say I think we have to say to them that every 5 years, we're going to have a gut check and see whether we're achieving the goals we said we were going to achieve. And if we aren't, there's going to have to be some changes made. But I wouldn't get too far down the road in terms of even on do we pay subsidies for the INA upgrades? I don't think we need to decide that now. I think that's something to be decided by the Board of Health down the road.
Yeah, that's a good point. The subsidy could always be removed at a future date if you feel you don't need it.
Yep, and that's
I don't think if we give them 17 options, we're going to have an easier time of selling it than if we give them 3.
Right.
I agree, and I think your point is well taken, Scott, where you basically said, we're going to look at this every 5 years. Things
Yes.
change.
Yeah.
You could say the subsidy goes down, or the subsidy stays the same, or what happens if Title V basically says you don't have a choice. The state has adopted something so subsidizing it isn't.
Well, the other thing to keep in mind here is a critical part of this plan is, in fact, if you look at the numbers, the big driver is right here, these enhanced INAs, right? And we're proposing to use systems that, again, we've talked about this a lot, are provisionally approved. It's highly likely, in my opinion, that if the Board of Health goes forward with this regulation, let's say this year, and we get some partners like maybe Truro and Barnstable and other towns do the same thing, some of these provisionally approved systems, notably the Nitro is the one that's probably most likely, will get general approval. Then it's going to be really easy, or a lot easier, for DEP to sign off on this thing. Right now, they're going to be, we'll see what happens at this meeting coming up in a week or two, but my guess is they're going to be a little, not as excited as they could be, because we're basing this on a provisional system here. But again, what we're saying is, give us phase 1 to get through this. There's 250 systems in here. We only need 50, roughly 55 statewide, to get general approval for 3 years. So, and there's already about 20 of these in the ground. Barnstable's putting another 15 in this year as a pilot project. So my guess is we're going to get there well within this first 5-year period. And then that could change the requirements for the subsidy and also DEP's comfortableness with the plan. But I think we do need the triggers.
Richard said, this is our best shot. There's no guarantees. But, this is, and this, and theoretically, the Board of Selectmen would be recommending it, the Finance Committee would be recommending it, there'd be other committees would be recommending it, as, the best thing that the town of Wellfleet could be doing to try to tackle this wastewater problem. And that's really the question, is this the best thing that we can do? And I think my own personal, I think if anybody can do this, the levels of reduction that we're looking at for as little money as what we're proposing to actually be done for, nobody would ever thought that 5 or 10 years ago. This is just remarkable that we have this opportunity because of the 208 plan, because of the work that Scott and I did working on getting a lot of other technologies approved, within the 208 plan. It's provided an opportunity for the town. And this question is, does the town want to walk through that door?
So we've got some town members on the phone, on the Zoom memory. We got Gary and we got Elaine and we got Harry. And I'd be curious to what they think about all this discussion we just had as to do we have a better chance of seeing God than seeing the town accept $6.5 million of capital expense and $500,000 a year in operating expenses. So Gary or
Sure, I can give you, I had a couple questions, but on the slide that you had the warrant item on, Kurt, is the 1.7 for 95 Lawrence, is there an offset for the 750,000 that you hope to get from the developer, or is that in addition to the money you're asking for?
That
1.9, excuse me.
yeah, so the 1 system, so that's in addition to what the developer would be contributing.
That's in addition to, so the total cost, so you might
Is the
put that up
town's,
just from a political point of view, if it's actually 2.6 or whatever the number is,
yeah, the total,
but you're getting an offset, that's a more attractive perhaps positioning of it. The other thing that I was going to comment on the O&M part of it is we had a discussion at the select board about designated the short-term rental tax for housing, but it sure seems like we could make common cause. And if what you need is $100,000 a year from the short-term rental tax to fund the O&M plan.
probably,
Yeah, I mean, and Kurt, just roughly, it's at least 500,000. It's if it goes up, if we go to the higher tax, but I don't see that the revenue for short-term rental is going to go down anytime soon. So that's a source of that money for you. So you could be looking at that so that it's not incremental to the town.
But you're not, the O&M plan isn't relying simply on 100,000 from the short-term rental, right? Am I reading this correct?
well, the projections that we have at the moment for what we're bringing in from the short-term rental tax, between 500 and 600,000. It is expected that over time, and frankly, I'm probably going to take out, the wastewater committee, a recommendation as far as where the O&M money is from. Really, we're just putting it out there that, in order to do a wastewater plan, it's going to require 430 annually for the O&M component. How the town wants to fund that is up to the town. Oops, did I lose?
No. So do you think it's better off taking that out? The recommendation?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's up to administration and the Board of Selectmen. Our job is simply to present what the costs are going to be for what we think is the best case scenario for the town of Wellfleet. What pot of money that comes from, it doesn't really matter to us. Right?
I agree.
I don't understand. Why don't we want to tell them it's going to be $432,000 a year?
We do want to tell them that. What we don't want to necessarily say is that we recommend appropriation from the short-term rental tax, because there are a lot of people vying for funds from that. Not a lot of people, but there's at least one other committee that's vying for funds from that.
Got it. Understood. Got it.
I would also second what I think it was Richard said, but to simplify the argument, both to the select board and if in fact you have the warrant article at town meeting, the complexity of the three options. And because at the end of the day, you are the wastewater committee, you studied this, and here is the proposal that you recommend. This is the best choice for the town.
Harry or Elaine, do you have anything, any thoughts?
Go ahead, Elaine.
Well, just real quick, I do want to remind you that at the town meeting last year, we asked for the town to authorize $3.8 million in borrowing for the water system. And that got us a $2.5 million Mass Works grant. So we are asking the town to authorize potential borrowing, but I think the intention is to try to find help with that. I know we can't promise that. I guess with the IAs, I wouldn't go overboard with that. I think a pilot program's a great idea. I think there's a lot of people that could afford their own IA systems and their loan programs to help, but I think getting it going is a great idea. And I guess my big concern is that 95 Lawrence is the project that is actually in the works right now. So if for some reason this whole package didn't go, I'm concerned about where we would be with that a little bit. I mean, I think I think it's a beautiful forward-thinking picture of what the town should be looking at. And I think with enough outreach, there'll be the support, but I do have a little concern about where we might end up with the one project that's actually has a lot of money and energy committed to it already.
Kurt, just a couple of very, very brief comments. One is to second the comments about offsets. I don't know what other grant opportunities are out there, but certainly in the past, where we've borrowed for significant projects, the state has required us to borrow for the full amount of the project, even if there were offsets available, or to authorize the borrowing for the full amount of the project, even though there were offsets that were available. But the actual borrowing that we made was the net amount after applying whatever other grants and other sources of funding were out there. Second thing is, I think that you have to be clear about the ramifications of the do nothing option. I've run into this, time and time again, with the police station renovation, with the Cape Tech project, with the Nauset High School project. Kicking the can down the street appears to a lot of people to be much more attractive than it really is. And you should be prepared to say that there is a cost associated with it, and it will be substantial, and substantial in relation to this. Not just substantial in the cost in relation to the cost of a cheeseburger, but substantial in relation to the cost of your preferred alternative. And so, those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry, and Elaine. I do think that, this slide is sort of a placeholder for that concept of offsets. We don't know whether it's going to be 25 to 75%, but there's a very, very large potential for offsets. So, out of that 6.4, the town, as you mentioned, Harry, may only be borrowing, 25 or 50% of that. But again, it's an authorization for the 5-year plan. And I don't know any stronger arguments than, a building moratorium potentially in 2 years. I can't think of anything that would be more draconian for the town of Wellfleet. Other than,
just to kind of like juxtapose this, didn't Provincetown have a building moratorium along Commercial Street for the longest time because of floodplain restrictions? And once they adopted the new floodplain maps, all of a sudden those moratoriums were lifted, and all of a sudden there was a huge build on Commercial Street up and down, and therefore it enhanced. All of a sudden you just had a lot of business going on, building business going on in Provincetown. Do you want to, I guess pointed out, it's basically said, do you want to, if we don't do this, there could be a building moratorium, which means we will lose this much business. Here's an example of how much business exploded when when the building moratorium was lifted. I'm just thinking of messages here, guys. How do we quantify what that would work? What that means to like the plumbers and electricians and the builders in Wellfleet.
Well, a large part of this plan is focused on future growth. I think it's, in fact, about half of the nitrogen reduction in this plan is future build out from the point of time MEP did the study, which is, let's say, 7 or 8 years ago. So, a moratorium would be very logical. If the town decides to do nothing, it seems like a minimal measure would be to put a moratorium in place to try to prevent that additional 10,000 kilograms per year of growth until you figure out a plan. And the most likely plan that's going to come about is a sewering plan, I think. And the range of costs is probably somewhat similar to what we talked about here tonight. So I don't know if there's a way to, you don't want to threaten people, but there's reality here, right? And maybe we could maybe some of those points could be made that a big part of this is future growth. The part of this plan is to accommodate future development. I think it's about half.
Did you I don't want to get ahead of anybody, but I was just noticing, did we ever update the health regulation that we would have to put in place?
Yes, I can show that to you if you'd like.
I don't know. I don't want to, if people want to talk about this more, we can.
Well, my view is the sooner we get that put in place, the better off we're going to be. What's that? Kurt, do you want me to show that?
Yeah, what I can do though is we need to make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen and to the Finance Committee.
You like a
And
motion?
so, what's that?
Would you like a motion? you trying to get a vote on
That would be
this, or-
wonderful. That would be great.
I'd move that we recommend to the selectmen and the finance committee, and ultimately at town meeting, that we adopt, that we get authority to borrow $6.5 million or 6.4 something, based upon the slides here, for capital costs for the first 5 years of the 25-year program, and that we seek operating expense and maintenance money on an annual basis, beginning for the first year at 432,000 or whatever it is. I don't know that I'd recommend the appropriation for the first 5 years because it may differ from year to year. But I do it for the first year, and I don't think the town meeting typically votes operating expenses for subsequent town meetings, subsequent fiscal years. I do think it's important to tell the town that this is going to be an ongoing expense, but it may be more than that, it may be less than that. We won't know until we've really gotten down the road a bit. But I don't know that they normally that you normally adopt something that's for an operating expense over a 5-year period. But otherwise, the numbers here are what I would move for. Was that too long a motion?
Yeah, why don't we do the first one first? Why don't we do the capital one first?
Okay.
And then we can talk about the O&M one.
Well, then I'd move that we seek authority at town meeting to borrow authority for the 6.43 million capital plan, and to have it as excluded from the provisions of Proposition 2.5.
I second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. So on the, on the O&M one, Richard, I think if we're going to have a responsible management entity, that's going to be an annual subcontract for that. So that's going to be an ongoing expense. Year 2, it's not like you can come back and say, well, we're not going to authorize it this year.
Yeah, okay, so, I mean, I suppose in a way it might be like a union contract. We know what the expense is going to be for 3 years. I'm just not familiar enough with town finances. So I'd move then that we ask for the town to approve a 5-year plan where we get $450,000 a year for 5 years.
For operation and maintenance.
Correct. Did we lose Kurt?
We seem to have that kind of, wait, he's coming back. There he is.
Sorry about that. I just have a terrible internet connection. So we don't really have I think much of an option with some of these items, Richard. The shellfish propagation, that's an annual expense.
No, I think these all will be. I just don't know whether the appropriate way to do it is to do a 5-year plan and say we want the town to approve now expenditures for the next 5 years. But if that's appropriate, I would think the finance committee would know whether it's appropriate to do that. I certainly recommended to the finance committee that makes sense. And I think it makes sense from the DEP's perspective that we could show that we've got funding for 5 years. Both for the capital plan and.
Right. I mean, the town has, and the other piece here is 95 Lawrence Road project. It's 52,746 that's going to escalate over time, specific to operating the wastewater treatment facility there.
Right. So, I mean, do we ask for this for 5 years with the understanding that we may come back in year 2 and say it's not enough?
Is Harry still on?
No, he left, I think.
Yeah. From my standpoint, I think if we recommend this, we can let the finance committee figure out how they want to do it and the
Okay.
board of selectmen. We're just telling them, we're just trying to alert them that there's not a $430,000 a year expense that the town's going to need to figure out how to fund. And that can take a variety of forms.
Kurt, I don't know if I'd just make a quick suggestion. What if you just
So if
suggest getting the 1 year approved with a footnote saying, we're going to come back each year. This is operation maintenance implies that it's ongoing for starters, but you're going to come back each year with an update on whether these numbers are going to go up a little bit or down a little bit.
Or we better off going to
I think that's,
recommending, telling them it's going to be 5 years. It's going to be at least this much, and let them figure out how to present it to on the
right.
meeting.
So if we were to make a motion, it would be, I move that we recommend an operation and maintenance budget included in the town O&M operations budget of $432,746, at least for year 1, and just make that recommend, and that's our recommendation. Here's our capital expenses.
Yeah.
These are our O&M expenses yearly. We recommend those.
Is there a second on that?
Second.
Great. So I think you're right, Fred. And anyway, what'll happen as normal course of business is, once you have a budgeted amount, that's part of the town department budget, it will be reviewed annually anyway.
Okay, so all those agreed? I think to say, Kurt.
Yeah. All those in favor?
I'm in.
Terrific.
Okay, so we passed those 2 things.
Good job, guys. It's not easy.
I know. Can we now look at the?
So the next. Yeah. So Scott, I have that.
Okay.
So this was the revised language.
I finalized
For the
the
Board of
edits
Health
that you made,
regulations.
Kurt. You had some edits that I
Okay.
made some, so maybe if you stop sharing, I'll throw it up real quick.
You want to do yours?
Yep, I think
Okay,
it's more
yeah.
current. Let's see, share screen. Okay. Well, it's a little different. So I just added this purpose, which we might want to expand a little bit. I think this is all the same. The base condition would be everybody's going to put an INA. Remember, this is just an amendment because currently this is required within wetland setbacks, I think. So the first step would be to require that throughout the watersheds. And then here's our incentives. There are 3 of them to go to the enhanced, the 12.5. And I think this number, Kurt, is something you calculated on the basis of the tax exemption. And then we've got the allowance for the bedroom or the accessory dwelling unit here. And this got changed down here. This 610 has not been changed. That's just a definition of an enhanced INA. It lists the 3 technologies that we believe work right now and allows applicants to come in with third-party testing on additional systems. And I think we'll get that. I think they're out there. They're knocking on the door. Once there's a market, the people will come. And then the last item I did, made some revisions, I think, Kurt, based upon your suggestion. We took out the 10-year thing and basically said, hey, as long as this thing is working and it's up to the Board of Health, it can remain in place. So I guess the scenario here would be you'd have somebody do this in the downtown area, then you put a sewer in later. And with a sewer, you're going to have a betterment charge for that homeowner, and they've already spent some money to do this. This would allow them to stay on the INA system if they want to.
They probably still have to pay the betterment though.
Well, maybe not. I guess this, at least my view of this, is they would not have to pay for that because they're not going to hook up to the sewer, right?
Well, usually the betterment, as I understand it, betterments are usually done based upon who can hook up, even if you don't.
Okay, well, that may be true. That may be something we need to look at then.
Yeah, and we don't know how, I think it's a little I think this is fine because we don't know how a sewer system would be, would be financed. It could be through connections. It could be normally a sewer system is you do a betterment, which collects for the system, and then there's a connection for each home.
Can I jump in?
Emily, do
Kurt?
you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, Title V is if there's no sewer, you can Title V. And there's a general law that the town has to adopt that enables you to charge the betterment. But it basically then says, if it goes in front of your house, you get charged the betterment. Provincetown did the checkerboard, right? Where they could pick and choose who was going to be paying the betterment based on who had Title V, was opting in, opting out. And they did ultimately have the choice to grant that checkerboard exemption, but it came after the special legislation was passed at the state.
So Emily, I mean, we could do that here in Wellfleet as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're okay.
Yep.
The one thing, Scott, is I think the definition 610 really should be 609 and 609 should be 610. Because I think you want the definition before the incentives.
Okay. Okay.
Also, the incentives seem like the language is, it's not mandatory. It's sort of squishy. In other words, it says that there could be a grant of $12,500 or a tax exemption. Tax exemption, the amount of $12,500 is worth a lot less, obviously, than a grant of $12,500. And it's unclear in this whether this is something that the Board of Health has a choice of, A, B, and C, or whether you apply for A, B, or C.
I think the intent was to provide the options for the property owner. But you're right, it doesn't say that.
You never want the tax exemption then. I mean, you get $81 a year instead of $12,500 straight up.
Right.
Want to take the exemption.
The other thing, Rich, I think is that the enhanced IA system is actually going to be more, anybody that due diligence on this is going to find out that an enhanced IA is going to, not an enhanced IA, a standard IA system is going to be much more expensive than a Title V system. And in this case, if they go for the enhanced IA, it's a Title V system with a black box, and we're paying for the black box. So it's going to be much less expensive for them to choose, the enhanced IA.
Yeah. Hey, just back to the tax thing. I don't understand how this was derived, Kurt, but would it make sense just to take this 8125 out there? Because I imagine there are different ways to provide a tax exemption. Maybe it could be over a shorter period of time. Could if we just get rid of that? Because I agree that
It looks like that's saying that you take the tax on $12,500.
something like that, right? So if I just delete that, would that make sense?
Well, I put it in there for your benefit and for our benefit. I don't know that you keep it in the reg, but that's what it's worth. If the town exempts 12.5 from your tax base, at our current tax rate, that 12.5 would be worth $81.25 a year.
I was thinking of it not as a 12.5 deduction on your taxable, but actually the 12.5 credit. Maybe it's more like a credit, I guess is what I was thinking, which would be equal to the
Yeah,
dollars.
it is. It's a credit. Yeah, I don't think the town can give a credit of 12.5. I don't see how we do that. Normally what the town does is exempts, it allows for an exemption of property. So you're basically reducing the amount of property. So if like you have a $500,000 house and you exempt 12.5, your house is taxed at the, 4,875. That's what its value is, and it's at and then it's at that tax rate.
Well, this was
So
This
you're
was Marie.
exempting-
Go ahead, sorry.
It was also what was done with solar. So typically what towns do is they'll allow you to exempt some property to reduce your taxes. But I don't know that Bullfleet has too many other examples where you're, providing a direct financial payment. There are some affordable reductions, but I think those are property tax reductions too. So your amount of property is reduced, so it lowers your taxes. Emily, do you know of any others where towns are actually giving direct credit?
No, I don't. When you say a grant of 12,500, I thought I heard Scott say that basically the town would pick up the cost of the black box. So that would mean a piece of equipment that the town has purchased shows up at the job site and is incorporated into the design, matches the specifications on the plan.
That's essentially correct, Emily. That's what I had in mind, right? And
That just seems so clean and tidy,
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the tax exemption was actually Maria's idea. And so maybe we put that back to the select board.
The only thing I would say about the tax exemption, I'm looking at 12,500. What's the average? I mean, like, I know what my taxes. I don't think my taxes are $4,000 a year.
And but you're not getting a $12,500 tax exemption of taxes. You're getting an exemption off the value of your property. You're getting $21.25 a year based upon.
Oh, I get it. I see.
That's why I don't think anybody would ever. I mean, if you had a choice of 12,500 in your pocket today, or 81.25, and it doesn't say how long you get the exemption for. I can't imagine anybody wanting to take the exemption.
Unless the exemption is like forever.
Yeah, I mean, if you make an exemption, it's usually forever.
The town has a right to make an exemption for this. I mean, there's the solar exemptions that you were talking about, Kurt. Those are in the statute. And if you put in solar on and it's for generation of power on your own house, you get to you can exempt the cost of the added value of the solar systems are exempt from tax, but that's by statute.
The town can do the same thing though. Anyway, I just, again, I mean, I agree with you, Richard. If you're given a choice of an exemption or a grant of 12.5, I think it's clean. I'd take the 12.5.
Does it make more sense to go back to what Emily was saying and Scott seemed to agree with and say the town would pay for the black box if you could figure out language that makes it appropriate? That the town will pay for the additional treatment, whatever you want to call a box, that changes it from being an enhanced system to an INA system.
And that's one aspect, that's just one way to do it that gets touched once rather than get touched year after year by multiple people. I don't know. I think it's so neat.
Again,
That's really what we're talking about is the town would pay for the additional piece of machinery to change it from to make it an enhanced system.
Right.
Yeah, and I might change the language of grant up to 12,500. So because the thing is that we're not going to give everybody 12,500 if it's only going to cost them 35 cents to upgrade. Why would we give them 12,500?
Especially if you can get a contract to make 100 units and have them delivered within a year and get them for 10 or whatever it is. I think you're totally right on, Fred.
This is a pretty current number. I actually saw from John Smith, the manufacturer of nitro, that he's now using 13,000 as his number. So,
Hurry up.
as you said, Emily, constantly go
not going
one
down.
direction.
Can I
I
ask,
think- Yeah, go ahead, Emily.
I just wanted to know if, so the incentives include the following options. Is it A or B or C, or is it A and B and C?
I
Are
think
these
it's
all
or.
on
I
the
think it's
table?
or.
Okay,
No, it's
Good point.
and, because the
It is and.
additional bedroom or accessory dwelling unit.
So it's A or B. A and B, but both of them have an or in them.
It's A and B or C.
okay,
Because the black box is going to get paid for, and under
Mhm.
under the current IA regulation, you get an additional bedroom.
So basically, it should, so after 12,500 said and then it should say allowance of additional bedroom or allowance of a successful
Right.
accessory dwelling, right?
Yeah, because that's the way the
Yeah, that makes
additional
sense.
bedroom or ADU is already allowed for an IA.
So does this mean you get
And in addition to that, we're then going to pay the. Say again, Richard?
does this mean you get a second additional bedroom? Do you have a standard Title V?
No. No, you'd be getting the allowance for an additional bedroom is the same as what you're already allowed if you put in an IA. So it's just making both. It's making 608 or 60 or 610 the same, with the exception of the 610, you get 12.5 as well. I'm not being clear. Sorry.
And that makes
If you
sense.
put in an IA.
One thought is, I know what you're referring to, Kurt. In current Title V, if you go to an INA, you get 550 gallons per acre rather than 440. That is in existing nitrogen sensitive areas, which are public drinking water supply areas. The town can be more restrictive, meaning you don't have to give that extra flow. So this and here could be an or. This B could be an incentive which avoids the town giving them the 12.5, because frankly, I know in Bourne, we did a study a few years ago about this exact issue. What's the value of an extra bedroom? In that case, it was around $100,000. So essentially what you're saying to somebody here is if you put an enhanced IA and we'll let you increase the value of your home for $100,000. That's a pretty nice incentive alone. I mean, it could be either way, whatever the town wants to do, but I'm just saying I don't think you have to offer the 12.5 and the bedroom, even though period. I think it's up to the town.
Well, the other thing is,
I would point out it would be a great selling point, at least out of the back of the box. Because
I did what?
It's a
Say
great
again?
selling point out of the box.
Which one?
The both.
Yeah, either or though, Fred, or
Yeah, I'm just basically saying out of the box for the first 5 years, you give them 12.5 and an additional bedroom. That's a real selling point to people in the town.
okay.
Right.
I'm fine with that.
If you put sunset clauses in here too, and you might, I don't know if we want to put something in there,
Incentivize that.
that there are, we could, we will, the Board of Health will consider sunset clauses as we go forward. I don't know if we throw that in here now or just keep it away.
So you can put that as an option for.
I mean, I think our role is, I wouldn't do that. I would just basically, I think our role is to make a recommendation to the Board of Health. The
Yeah.
Board of Health is going to do this over, and they're going to change it, they're going to modify it. And, we just want some more like a model. I think it deserves a. So I agree with as far as that goes, but at the end of the day, we've also kind of, Hillary was very comfortable with the way this was set up. I think she kind of felt that having I can't remember where the additional bedroom in the ADU came from. I think it came from her. Is that right, Scott?
Well, actually, we had a good is Gary still on here? Because I thought some of this came from discussion with Gary and others on the affordable housing issue. I can't remember.
They liked it, but I think it came, I
Okay.
think Hillary actually suggested it in the first place.
Okay, okay.
I could be wrong on that, but, you know, again, we're just going to make a recommendation to the Board of Health, and the Board of Health is then
Yep.
going to, you know, adopt it or not adopt it, modify it, et cetera. What do you,
Yep.
I mean, what do you think, Emily? Should we get into some of this other stuff, or you think it's okay as it stands?
I think it's okay as it is. I mean, I think the board ultimately is going to have public hearings on this, and, you know,
Right.
you know, the devil's in the details, and this is great up front. It really, it makes you listen.
So Emily, maybe we
This
can
was a
have
hook.
Emily, maybe we can have a contest here and see whether Truro or Wellfleet adopts this first.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I would, you guys are on, you're on. Let's go.
And the prize will be $12,500.
Your own black box. Yeah, I think it's really smart the way you've done it, because this is exactly what people do want. They want to increase the value of their property for the most part, and or preserve it in the least. So,
Well, you know, the other reason why I drafted it this way is looking at the Buzzards Bay study where they put in a bunch of these down in Falmouth and Bourne. You know, if you start from scratch, the cost of doing this is 25 to 35 grand. But if you attach it to, you know, somebody who's already digging up their property for a repair, they want to add an expansion or new construction, they're already digging it up, then it really limits it to the marginal cost of the treatment box. So it really makes it a lot more efficient if we tie it to when you are, and that's why this first paragraph here really deals with. Now, I did add, the other thing I added, I should mention this, is right here, property transfers. Originally, we just had new systems, repairs, and upgrades, meaning the property owner comes to the Board of Health, they want to do something. They're saying, we want to dig up our property and fix something or expand it. In that case, they're going to incur these costs anyways, the landscaping, et cetera. But property transfers, that would not be the case necessarily, but it would increase the frequency, the numbers of these, which I think would be helpful. And I think, Kurt, you may have mentioned that this is also a good time to, you know, have people think about this, because there's a little bit of an expected possible cost increase. So I did add that. That's a new, that was not here the last time, the property transfers.
you might want to drill into the definition of the transfer too, just so
Okay.
that you're getting everything, because there's a lot of transfers that aren't caught by the DEP's definition. We've taken a lot of time to get it all. And
Is
I
there
think
an easy wordsmithing here that will fix it? You
that,
can think of?
all property transfers, you know, and just I would define property transfers somewhere, because it's going to
Okay.
take
Okay.
some language, but I could send you that, what we're
Okay.
using right now, Scott. It basically came from our assessor who, you know, he and I worked on all the different aspects of transfers, which includes, you know, forming a trust in an LLC, just so that you can,
Okay.
you know, increase your capture.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You bet.
Yeah, and I think, and again, Hillary's not here, but I think Hillary's thought here was to, when she articulated it anyway, was that at the time of a sale, so she was thinking, I think, more specifically to sales and not necessarily to, you know, an internal family transaction, but where there's money on the table, because at that time, this kind of stuff happens all the time, where you've got to fix a roof, or you've got to fix a septic system, or you've got to fix, you know, anything that's, you know, structurally related to the property to get it in fit condition for somebody else to take it over. That was the thinking there. So Emily, are you thinking that you might also extend it to, I think you were saying like a trust, formation of a trust, or something that's not necessarily a financial transaction?
Correct. And the reason for that really is, you know, what's your goal? You know, if you're looking to get as much done in as short a period of time as possible, you want to increase your capture, that's all. So, and this is, you know, of course, wherever you folks are with your plan, you know, and hitting your TMDLs. So,
When we put in transfers, that's going to bump your number up from 60 to something much larger than what we had planned.
Yeah,
60
probably
was
like
just
100 or
on-
so. I would
Yeah,
guess.
60 was just based on new and repairs,
Yep.
because we knew those numbers.
Yep.
We don't know how many transfers we actually do. So
How do
what
we
was
find,
in
how do you
Scott's
find that
numbers?
out? How do you find that? How do you find that out?
I sort of have that data.
Yeah, Nancy Vale will have that.
All right, well, maybe that would be useful to have for future when we discuss this with the Board of Health. We give them an idea how many. Somebody can look into that. That'd be
And that's
great.
just Emily in Truro, when a re-recording happens, does the assessor, I guess the assessor gets that paperwork too? Because it's now a trust.
yes. Those
So
aren't
she would
as,
have those numbers as well.
yeah, they gather all that data. So they'll have to sift it to whatever, you know, specification you're really going to look at. So.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody have any thoughts or feelings on this further?
Would you like a motion?
Sure. Fred, are you there? He's muted right now.
I'm here, guys. I'm listening.
Okay.
I have no additions. Well, let me put it this way. I mean, like, if we had, the only thing I thought of immediately was if we had property transfers, then all of a sudden, all of Scott's numbers change.
Actually, maybe not, Fred, because the 60, if I have to go back to my other sheet there. Actually, I got it right here. If you remember 65 and I look at this sheet again, I have under the option A, INAs, I've got 800 every 5 years. What's that? Help me out here.
60.
80, 100, 160 per year, right?
Yeah.
So we go up, so that would be, so if we need 160 per year to hit the TMDL, and we got 65 upgrades and repairs, that means this assumes we have 100 property transfers. So let's find out what that number is and see how close it comes.
Well, I guess what it comes down to though is that we're going to pay 12.5 for each property transfer on top of it.
Well, these numbers assume everything's getting, this number here, the bigger one, is subsidy for all EIAs, all 2 Ls. Whoops. So that is, this number here assumes they're all paid for.
So let me get this straight, right? And we might have to get a clarification from Hillary on this, but when they say upgrades or repairs or something like that, does that include upgrades and repairs because of property transfers?
It could, if the property
Well,
transfer
yeah.
triggers an upgrade and repair, that would include that, right?
In other words, when she said to us it's
Yeah, the system.
70 a year was included in that 60, 70 a year because some property transfers don't require any.
Right, that's why the number would go up from the number would become 65 plus all the property transfers that don't require upgrades
Got it.
at the time of the inspection, and I don't know what that number is.
Yeah, so in other words, Fred, for example, if the system gets tested on the, you know, during a sale, and if the septic system fails, it has to get upgraded at a transfer, and that would be included, that's a repair or an upgrade regardless. So those are already included. It's as Scott said, it's ones that would otherwise not have to be upgraded that are in addition to the 65.
And it looks like, according to these numbers, I need about 100 of those to get to this TMDL compliance rate. So it would be worth finding out what that number is in Wellfleet so that we'll be able to say whether or not that's on track or not.
You must have had some sort of conversation with somebody to come up with that in the first place, right?
To come up with which one? 800?
Um, the 800 comes from,
The 800 comes from how many I need to get to my TMDL. I back calculated it to get to the right number. That's where it comes from.
oh, okay.
So I think what we're talking about now
Okay.
is actually a very good and important conversation. And that is, if we're going to rely on upgrades, repairs, new construction, and transfers, how close does that get us to this 800 for every 5 years, or 160 per year? I'm guessing it might get us pretty close, but it'd be nice to have that.
Scott, that's in the 2026 to 2030 timeframe. What's in the 20?
In the first one, I've got 250 in the first
So you're
5.
going up in the years, but the first 5 years, what do you have?
Yeah, I got a smaller number in the first 5 years because I figured because we're dealing with provisional systems, we may not have as much adoption. I just put 50
So
per
you got
year.
50 a year in the first 5 years, and then you're
Correct.
going up to then you went up to
160.
160 in the subsequent 5-year periods.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah, so, and 50's below what we're currently doing.
Right. But remember, the way the regulation is drafted,
We're
it's
doing
still
a-
an option. It's option for the homeowners to do the enhanced INA. They could pick, no, I don't want to do that.
Right,
So that's why I figured 50 was conservative.
okay. Is everybody clear on that?
I'm clear.
So what do you think,
Need a
Richard?
motion here?
Yeah, I sure.
So I move that we provide the Board of Health the regulation as written for their consideration, I guess. Does that encompass what we need to move?
I second.
Yeah, I think that's good. Good. All those in favor?
Aye.
Terrific. So our homework is to figure out for Scott the subsequent 5-year intervals and what transfers look like. If they adopt the transfers language, that's going to bump up our first 5 years.
Well,
Well, it depends on remember, it's an option the way we have it drafted.
Right. Yeah, but it's cheaper to do the enhanced IA
Right.
than a regular old IA.
Right.
The regular old IAs are almost twice as expensive. So anyway, I think it's a great start. I think it's wonderful. I think it's, if we can get if the Board of Health, the Board of Health probably won't want to adopt this until town meeting votes for the money. Because this
Right.
is in as an option to be financed by the town.
Unless there's some funding to get it going before that. We're really
Yeah, I
not
don't
that
see
far
it.
away. April, May, June, right?
Yeah.
3 months.
June is town meeting, and so, and
Yep.
it would be great if the Board of Health is one of those boards that is also recommending the waste ban.
Yeah.
Terrific. Well, that's all I had for the agenda today. Does anybody have anything else?
Move to adjourn?
Well, the only question I have, and I don't mean to after only an hour and a half of enjoying each one and everybody else that was on the phone, but when do we have to kind of present all this to the Finance Committee and the
Soon.
Board of Selectmen?
The Board of Selectmen have asked us to meet with them ASAP.
Okay.
Rebecca was going to schedule that meeting. I don't have a date yet.
What nights do they meet, Kurt? Just so I can start thinking about which nights.
We meet Tuesday.
You got froze there. Tuesdays?
Yeah, it's Tuesday, 7 o'clock. And I think, I can't remember if they're not meeting tonight. So they're meeting on the 1st and of the month.
Okay.
Tonight's Monday, so they usually meet, they would meet tomorrow if they were gonna meet.
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. I don't believe they're not meeting tomorrow. So they're meeting the 1st and 3rd.
All right, well, Kurt, if you could get me some dates, I do have other hearings going on in other towns. I want to make sure these are important meetings. I want to make sure I get them logged in. So if you could let me
Okay.
know as soon as possible, that'd be great.
Absolutely. Anything else, Fred?
The
to
finance
answer-
committee.
Yeah, Finance Committee, that's actually a strategic question. There was one thought to have the Finance Committee and Board of Selectmen be part of this joint meeting, so have both of them there. There was another thought to do separate meetings. One with the Board of Selectmen and one with the Finance Committee. There's pluses and minuses to both options, which all have to do with politics.
Okay, I'm really bad at politics. From a business perspective, we could talk to them both at the same time. It would be great.
I'll second that.
And basically say,
That's what
guys,
we'll-
we're going to put this on the warrant. The capital is on the warrant. The O&M is the finance committee has to figure out how you're going to plug it into the budget.
Well, it's still gonna have to be on the warrant because it's increasing the budget.
Okay. Well, there you go.
It's gotta be an item on the warrant, whether they
So
put it in.
it would be kind of us to warn that the finance company that we're going to put this on the budget. And they're going to have to figure out, whether they have the money within the budget to pay for it.
And they'll obviously be making a recommendation for or against it.
Yeah, there you go. All right. So if we can talk to both of them at once from a business perspective, that would be great. But but from a political perspective, I am really bad at politics. So you guys tell me.
They'll tell us. They'll tell us. Anything else?
Motion to adjourn. Oh, that was Richard's motion. Sorry. I second it, Richard.
Fantastic. All those in favor?
Aye.
Terrific. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, guys.
Good night, everybody.
Take care.
Everyone.
Stay safe.